All right, welcome back to Gray America Outlawed. Today we have Adriene Caldwell with us. She's the author of Unbroken, Life Outside the Lines, and that is at unbrokencaldwell.com. That's her website where you can find the book and photos and documents and all that kind of stuff. So welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here with your audience and with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a privilege for us too. We're looking forward to chatting with you about your book, and it's kind of going to be a heavy topic, a heavy episode. Maybe you can take a couple minutes and introduce yourself and mention some trigger warnings for people.
Yes, thank you, Graham. Yes, I am Adriene Caldwell. I have written a book, Unbroken, Life Outside the Lines. It's the story of my life from early childhood to early 20s. And during this time, I was either the witness to or the victim of, and this is where my trigger warnings come in, the sexual assault of a young girl, the drowning death of another child, emotional and physical abuse, extreme poverty, mental illness, homelessness, horrifically abusive foster care, bulimia, drug and alcohol addiction, pedophilia, death, suicide, and incest.
So we might be touching on any or some of those topics, I guess.
Yes. I don't talk about religion, politics, and I prefer to avoid incest. But yes, everything is open.
Okay, Darren, were you about to say something there?
Well, I was just say that's quite the list of trigger warnings. So I guess we should maybe just start with how that sort of list came together, or how that sort of plays out, that the story has to have so much tragedy in it.
Yeah, that's a legitimate point. I have been through a lot. Starting at 5 years old. That was where I witnessed the sexual assault of my little girlfriend, and it just kept on going. A lot of it is generational. Mental illness runs in my family. My grandfather was schizophrenic. Not sure if you guys know, but schizophrenia doesn't develop in early childhood or really the main teenage years. It's late teens, early 20s. So my mother had me at 19, and she was also becoming schizophrenic at the same time. So her schizophrenia and I basically grew together. So, and it's been passed down. I have a cousin who is schizophrenic, as well as the physical abuse. My grandfather and my grandmother were both abusive to their 4 children, and that got passed down. It's very common in families, how the parents parent. That's how the kids see that it's supposedly meant to be done, and they just continue on. So a lot of what I've gone through really is just generational. It's been passed down in the family, as dysfunctional as it is.
And then now you're trying to break that cycle?
That's exactly right. Yes.
So why did you decide to come, because it must have been pretty heavy going into digging all this up, putting it out in a book? Why did you want to sort of end up writing a whole sort of memoir about this?
Sure. So I went to 13 schools by the time I graduated from high school, and I got very good at meeting people and starting conversations, having conversations, but they were always geared around the other person. I avoided talking about myself when at all possible. But on the rare occasions when I would talk about myself, I would get the same feedback. You should write a book. And I've heard that from, teenage years on. You should write a book. You should write a book. And it wasn't something that I aspired to one day. The book is kind of a reaction to a situation, if you will. So ultimately, my mother was not able to care for my brother and me. We were placed in foster care. He got adopted. I didn't. And I was a ward of the state of Texas. So at 18, I became an adult, fully responsible for myself. And at 20, I don't know if CPS sent me something in the mail. I can't remember what triggered it, but I contacted CPS and I asked them for my case file. I wanted to know, me 20 years old, I wanted to know what had been written about me. And I received this giant box, and it had these two huge stacks of paper in it. And over the last 20, 25 years, I would try to sit down with that box and start going through it, and I would just get overwhelmed and just have to close the box and shove it back under the couch, which is where I stored it. And I took it out when I was 40 and started going through it, and I got really angry about the abuse that I endured while I was in foster care. So to give it perspective, my schizophrenic, physically abusive mother, I've never had a nightmare about her. The foster parent, the foster mother that I had for 3 years, I've had nightmares about her as recently as a year ago, where I just wake up sobbing. And that was from emotional abuse, strictly emotional abuse, no physical, no sexual, just emotional. And anyone who says emotional abuse is not valid is flat out wrong. So I'm going through these documents and I'm just getting angrier and angrier. And I want something to happen. I want there to be some sort of consequence for what that woman did to me and what she put me through. So I'm reaching out to lawyers, to the state, to basically anyone who would listen, saying, something should be done about this. First, make sure that that woman never has another foster kid again. And two, my situation, I want there to be repercussions. I want consequences. And everyone just said, you're too late. The statute of limitations is up. There's nothing that can be done about it. And that's really when I started writing. And I started at the beginning.
Did you remember all that stuff, or was reading it in the box, was that like for the first time in some ways, or did you recall most of the abuse first? Did you have all those memories of it, or was some of it new? Did you recall any of it?
I remembered the abuse and everything that I had gone through. It was interesting to see how the foster mother would phrase things and write things. She was clever in what she wrote and how she wrote it. But I have a story where the next door neighbor, this woman named Helen, for some reason, the police were contacted. Something had happened at the foster mother's house, and the police interviewed Helen, the next door neighbor. And the quote, which is in the police report, says, "Prisoners are treated better than how she treats those girls." And Helen knew what she was talking about because she had worked in the prison system for 30 plus years. So no, I remembered everything. It was interesting to see like the court documents where my brother was adopted and my mother relinquishing parental rights. I actually have a ton of documents on my website, Unbroken Caldwell. I put them out there for anyone who's interested, and including things like psychiatric evaluations. That was really enlightening. I found 2 psychiatric evaluations that I had never read before. And the first one was done when I was 13 years old. and they just nailed it. They got it completely right. And a year later, another psych eval was done. And in that year, I had learned what to say and how to say it and to manipulate and kind of game the system. So the second one isn't nearly as accurate, but the first one is. And it named me as having an early onset reactive attachment disorder, dysthymia, which is the precursor to major depressive disorder, obsessive compulsive, and the psych eval is at the end of my book as well as on unbrokencaldwell.com. So, and I put these documents out there for a couple of reasons. One, with my list of trigger warnings and everything that I've gone through, it's reasonable to question it. Just the sheer volume of shit that I have endured. It's reasonable for someone to say, okay, she's got to be fudging. She can't really have gone through all of that. And I give you documentation. I have, as one of my beta readers called it, receipts. I have receipts. The other reason is one day I would like for my book and those documents, so Unbroken, Life Outside the Lines, is the firsthand account of the trauma and the abuse. And then those documents, I've put them into another book, if you will, a companion text. And I'd like for those to be used in psychology and counseling courses for students who are studying early childhood trauma. So that's the second reason why I make those documents available, because it gives, like, you get the firsthand account from me, what it was like as the child growing up with all that crap. And then you get the clinical documents, the therapist reports, the psych evals. So, yeah.
What do you think, before we start getting into some of the stories and specifics, what do you think the prevalence of what you went through is in foster care? Like, how many do you think you're an outlier? Do you think this is happening to 1 in 10? Is it 1 in 20? If you had to put a number on it?
Well, I don't have a number, but I can
Because
give
I'd
you some.
imagine you get some people reaching out to you at this point now. You've sort of put yourself, like, I'd imagine if you haven't, it's going to start happening where you get sort of all these kids who went through stuff in foster care telling you about their stories.
Okay, that was weird. 2 statistics. So when you're a foster kid until you're 18, and you can go to college. It has to be a public state university, but you can go to college for free. Tuition and fees are waived. And out of all the foster kids, only 3% take advantage of that. 3. My second statistic is the US prison population, 20% of the US prison population is made up of former foster kids. So,
wow, and that's 25% of the total prison population of the planet. So that's like 5% of the total prison population of the planet is foster kids in the US.
What do you? I find that so not unbelievable. When I say unbelievable, I don't mean it in a negative way to you or anything. But what's the, like? I just can't see the mechanism of that. Like, what you'd think people, besides cases like yourself, would be adopting people for good reasons, and they'd want loving families for kids to get adopted into. But you hear all these horror stories about the CPS. Like, what do you attribute those numbers to in general?
So there are several issues, several things that need to be changed for this system. The first one is that some foster parents, and there are good ones out there, there really are. I even had my first experience with the foster family was actually very positive. I was only there a month, but very positive. I think the fact that many, I'm not going to say most because I don't know the numbers. Many foster parents treat it as a profession. They don't have a career or vocational skills. They're doing this for money. So the more kids they can pack in their houses, the more money they make, and that's their end game. Next, I would say oversight. There is not enough oversight. Until we start prioritizing children, our children, the children that are already coming from abused homes, caseworkers are, I mean, just the burnout rate at 5 to 8 years, they're done. They can't handle it anymore. They're not paid hardly anything. They're not paid well enough. They're overworked. Having 30 plus kids on your caseload, I mean, trying to keep track of them and they're, if the caseworker can just keep them from becoming juvenile delinquents, we haven't even touched on that. The system, the way it is right now, needs a major overhaul. And until we start putting money behind our kids, they're going to continue to fail. They're going to continue to flounder. And they've made a lot of progress as far as turning 18 and then congratulations, you're an adult. Here's the street. It's not as bad as it was when I turned 18 and got out of the system, but there's not a smooth glide path in place. There really aren't solid plans in place. So, and the college thing, I need to clarify, it's not just college that the foster kids can go to. They can go to vocational schools. They can learn a trade, and it's completely free of charge. And they're still not taking advantage of it.
Would that include the housing as well? Would that include like residence or anything like that? Is it like a path to not being homeless at the same time?
They're making progress on it. When I went to college, my books and my rent or living in the dorm, that was all my responsibility. So my senior year of high school, I spent every morning writing letters asking for scholarship applications. But now they do have grants, they do have some assistance, they have a program where and it's not necessarily just for foster parents, but people with an extra room or like a mother-in-law suite, something along those lines. Those kids can go from living in a foster home to kind of this next step of independence, but still have a roof over their head. Now that comes with some rules and some oversight, which, if you're 18 and you've been through hell from living with your parents, and assuming that you have just a decent foster care experience, a lot of those kids just want to be in charge of their own life. They want to make their own decisions, and they're not really taking advantage of what's out there. So that program to transition into like the extra room, it's not as smooth. It's not as we still have a lot of kids graduating, turning 18, graduating from the system, turning 18, and then couch surfing on their friends' sofas.
Is there a transition period where you have to go through group housing or something like that in the system?
No, it's not a requirement. There is availability, but I know just from what I looked into, because I do have a mother-in-law suite available. So I looked into it, and I think the need far outweighs what's available.
And I guess like financial responsibility of the state sort of stops on your 18th birthday pretty much. So none of those foster parents have, if they were going to say keep you past 18, I guess I'd have two questions. Does that happen? And the second question would be, would that, I guess, completely be out of pocket for the for the foster parents, or is there still some sort of financial incentive?
It's my understanding that there is, well, a lot of it's up to the foster parent if they want to keep the kid in their home, and the kids, uh, it's hard to convince them to stay. They want to be independent. They would rather live on their friend's sofa than deal with foster parents who have rules and curfews and things like that. So, and honestly, I'm not enough of an expert to know the utilization rates and things like that. But I do know that they desperately need more people. That there is more demand, and we're still not taking care of these kids the way they need to be taken care of. So,
Through all ages.
through all ages, yes. So, it's my understanding that they have health insurance through the state, I guess Medicaid. They are allowed to stay on Medicaid. I believe the foster parents, if they move to like a graduated program, where they can stay with the foster parent but start to live independently, the foster parent does continue to receive income. But another problem that these kids are facing is pregnancy. The girls, I tried to be a volunteer with Children's Protective Services and mentor. I did mentor a girl, but and I went down to the Houston CPS office, and it shocked me how many foster girls had children already. And it didn't seem to me that there was anyone actively saying, let's get these girls on birth control. Let's make sure that they don't shoot themselves in the foot by having a baby at 15 or 16 or 12. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's a whole other wow. So
Well, it gets weird too, because in Canada it's like 54% of the kids in foster care are Indians.
Really?
Yeah, out of, I think, under 8% of the population, but 54% of the foster child population.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute it to that the 60s scoop just never stopped. In the 60s, they were straight up selling Indian kids to white people all over North America. There was like advertisements that were going in magazines and stuff like that. Like if you wanted to adopt a white kid, it might be, you'd probably know the waiting things longer than me, but it was like a huge. There was some stats and a thing I was doing for a book I wrote that said exactly, if back in the 60s, if you wanted to adopt a white kid, it might take you 6 months to several years. But if you wanted an Indian kid, you could pretty much have him next week type thing. And I think it's just proof that system never stopped, even though it got called out and all that stuff sort of happened. The child welfare system in Canada would show that that's still happening, because 90% of the kids that are getting taken from the reserves aren't going to homes on the reserves. So it's still just assimilation by design type thing going on here, so none of these Indian kids are growing up with Indians. I mean, for better or for worse, I don't really have a skin in the game either way, but there's definitely a huge death of the culture going on. And the problem is that the Indians they're not in that process anywhere in Canada, whereas in the States, most of the tribes now are in charge of their own child welfare. In Canada, it's still the federal government, maybe the provincial government, one of the two.
The children are being abused? I'm
That
assuming.
I don't know. I mean, there's horror stories from back in the 60s that a bunch of these like kids were getting shipped over. They were actually being used as indentured servants for a while back in the 60s. Nowadays, I don't know the numbers, but I would assume that they're probably not far off of where the U.S. is at. We never seem to be that far off of where the U.S. is at for anything else other than like gun violence.
for what? What stat are you talking about?
Youth in foster care. Like I would say it's probably as prevalent in Canada as it is in the States.
Or Adrienne, did you mean outs before foster care or in foster care?
I'm sorry, specify?
Did you mean abused before foster care or
Yes,
yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Like why are so many of the children being taken from their homes?
Oh, well, I mean, all sorts of different reasons. And I would say that probably in a lot of cases, probably good reasons. You know, a lot of these reserves are a mess. There's a lot of alcoholism. There's a lot of abuse. There's a lot of suicide. There's a lot of, you know, all the things that are a problem are just 10 times worse on the reserves.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And the conspiracy would kind of be like they're taking them unfairly from the reserves, I think would be some of the arguments probably.
Well, one time they were. That's sort of I went to
Right.
sort of this history where they were just taking them from the reserve and then they just sort of started not sending them back.
Wow. Wow. I know when I was in foster care, I was essentially an indentured servant. I mean, she treated us less than human. I ended up painting her house inside and out at the foot of, standing at the top of a 12-foot ladder in Houston summer, painting the top of her garage, the side of her garage, everything. And what I went through, she in my book, I refer to her. Am I allowed to say a curse word?
Yeah.
Okay. I refer to her as the bitch from hell. I don't give her name. Her name is the bitch from hell, TBFH. And she treated us foster girls as subhuman, as completely inferior to her family. We were not allowed to sit on the furniture. We had to sit on the floor. There was one full bathroom, and then the master bedroom had a sink and a toilet. We were only allowed to use the toilet in our bedroom, the master bedroom, and we got the master because you can shove 4 to 6 girls in there. We were not allowed to use their toilet in the one full bathroom. At the end of the foster girls showering, whoever was last had to clean the tub with a bleach cleaner before her family, the foster mother's family, would use the tub. Separate dishes, separate silverware, separate food. When I first started messing with razors, I had cut my wrists, and when she looked at it, her response was, "You didn't even do it right. You're supposed to cut along the vein, not across." And then another time I was trying on swimsuits and I came out and she said, "Your thighs are fat. I'm surprised you haven't started throwing up to lose weight." And that started a battle with bulimia for me that continues to this day. So I generally believe that people are good and that the hell is going on? Jesus Christ. I am so sorry.
Okay.
I am so sorry. So animals are treated better than the way she treated us. And just more and more of that. We had an alarm on our bedroom door. So at night, we would basically get locked into the room. And I generally believe most people are good. I believe that people make the best decision they can at the time with the information that they have. But I can't reconcile with what that woman did to me. I've been able to forgive everyone else, but I struggle with her. To me, she was almost evil, if you will. for what she did to us. And it wasn't just me, it was all the foster girls. And I wonder what happened to her to make her need to make us so subservient and so inferior. Like, what damage did she have? But even that does not excuse what she did to us. I learned later on that she actually had a girl commit suicide while
Wow.
she was in her care.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I was going to ask you about forgiveness if you've managed to do that, I guess, with all the trauma, kind of the people responsible for trauma in your life. But yeah, so are you still trying with her, or have you given up on forgiving her, or?
I wish I could. I would feel better myself
Yeah, that's the thing.
to
It's
free
resentment. Yeah.
to free myself of the anger and the rage that I have towards her, but I'm just not there yet. And everybody else I've forgiven. I understand, my mother was mentally ill. She really was just trying to do the best that she possibly could. But yeah, with the bitch from hell, I don't know.
Would you how was there anything in the CPS file that, like, because you mentioned when you went into that box and you found all that stuff and it brought you back to that spot with her, was there stuff in there that that showed how abusive she was, or did you?
No.
No,
That's what I was trying to say earlier, was that she was very clever
very
in
good at
how
it.
she wrote things up.
Well, she's a professional foster parent, I guess, right? So she knows
Yeah.
how to play the system, right?
Yeah. I heard that she had her license revoked here in Harris County, in my county, but she lives in a different county, and I made sure to contact that county and let them know that under no circumstance should she be given foster kids.
Wow. How much do they get for money for per kid, sort of thing?
Well, so here's the thing. She didn't do just regular foster care. There's something called therapeutic foster care. It's for kids who are higher needs, whether that's developmentally, they need more assistance, or emotionally, mentally. And I fell into that category. In fact, my CPS caseworker said, Adrienne, the only way we can get a home placement for you is to put you in therapeutic foster care. So you have to understand, my TBFH, the bitch from hell, she wasn't an employee of the state of Texas. She worked for a for-profit company that contracted with the state of Texas to provide therapeutic foster care to these higher needs girls. And it's really a perverse incentive. The higher the need of the girl, the higher the pay. So there's no incentive to help the kids get better or to improve. In my opinion, it should be reversed. As you're helping the children, you get paid more for the resolution, for the trauma recovery that you're helping them through. But that's that's another thing where the oversight is seriously lacking. And as I mentioned, it's a for-profit company. It's Mentor Youth Services. They no longer do foster care here in Texas, but the company is still in existence. And I would sue them if I could.
How long were you there?
I'm sorry?
How long were you there with that particular lady?
3 years.
Was it the same group of girls you were there with the whole time, or did it change?
Yeah, they rotated in and out.
Do you keep in touch with any of them?
No. I ended up getting a congressional scholarship to do a 1-year foreign exchange to Germany. And I did everything in my power to just put everything behind me. I am like an expert at repressing emotions and compartmentalizing. Each trauma went in a box, the box went on a shelf, shut the door behind it. Yeah, no.
How was Germany? What was that like? Getting over to there, from leaving that to getting to Germany.
It was amazing. It was amazing. My host family, I'm still
When
in
would
touch
that have
with.
been? What would the year have been?
96, 97.
96, 90.
So, yeah. There's a program. It's called the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange. It's through Congress and the German Bundestag, their Congress. And 300 Americans are selected each year by 300 Americans, 300 Germans, and they do a foreign exchange, not to families, not, lose a kid, get a kid, not like that. But it was amazing. My host family showed me what it was like to be in a normal family. And you have to understand, I came from, a schizophrenic mother where she could never really fully support us to live independently. So we bounced between my two sets of aunts and uncles. And then eventually, when she got tired of my uncle telling her that it's not okay to beat me, that's when she said she wanted to live on her own. And that's when we went to a government apartment where we lived in the ghetto. We were literally the only white family in the entire apartment complex. And we were abjectly poor. Like, the dish soap that was used for dishes, we used that for our shampoo and our body soap. We used it for our clothes, which we washed in the bathtub. We didn't have a car, so grocery shopping, we either got food from the convenience store or there was like a little mini mart across the street. By the time my brother and I were taken into CPS custody, we were malnourished because we couldn't afford meat and there wasn't any meat to be purchased. Of course, food stamps don't cover paper goods, so we used wash rags instead of toilet paper because we couldn't afford toilet paper. We used baking soda because we couldn't afford toothpaste. We used, my brother and I shared a mattress on the floor. My mother slept on the floor until my aunt and uncle came and brought her a mattress. Poor. We were truly poor. And the government apartment was actually an improvement. We had come directly from the Salvation Army homeless shelter. So my summer after fourth grade, we lived in the downtown homeless shelter, downtown Houston. So.
Did you say Texas doesn't have a CPS anymore, or what did you mean when they don't have the program or something, or they stopped that, or?
Which program?
I think that was just one company that was involved.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you meant the whole government program was not there anymore.
Yeah, no, it exists, but it's just so poorly run. I mean, until we start to value our children and until we put some money behind it, get the caseworkers less, when you've got caseworkers burning out between years 5 and 8, you're losing all that experience, all that knowledge. You're coming in with rookies fresh, dumping just too many kids on them. And it's just, the system is so flawed. I guess it's better than nothing. But I remember a lot of foster kids wanting to be back with their parents. They'd rather go through what they were dealing with from their parents than what they're dealing with from foster parents.
Yeah. Well, it's changed quite a bit since, I guess since you were there too. Like I remember growing up in the 80s, 90s, we had a psych ward that they closed them all down in Canada. I think it might have been the same in the States too, but there was a whole movement to like close all those institutions down. And now, now a lot of people end up on the street. So I think you had an experience in one of those wards that probably changed your life, right? And I guess I'm wondering, do they still have those? Is that something that you think they need to bring back if they don't have that support anymore, for you to actually be able to go to some place to get psychological help?
Well, I think it's pretty standard practice for CPS to have like an intake procedure where children go through psychiatric evaluation. That's pretty standard, and it helps identify what their needs are, what their issues are.
In a
So,
home, in a institution type environment?
no, the group homes, and then there are also living arrangements where the staff is like therapist staff, clinical workers running the institution, the establishment. So I never lived in one of those. I just lived in a therapeutic foster home, not an institution per se.
Do you know how that compares to whatever they're doing in Europe? Like, what is it? Does Europe have this problem? What? Because I guess you were in Europe sort of right after it. Was there any sort of? I guess by then you're already too old to understand what their system looked like.
Yeah, I had an amazing host family, and I never encountered anyone in Germany who was in foster care. I know it exists, but the scholarship I received was to go live with just a German host family and to go to German high school and to kind of live life as a German. So I wish I knew more, but yeah, I never even came across a kid who was a foster kid.
What about your experience I think I was listening to you on another show, and you talked about that. I don't know if it's a spiritual experience or a level of acceptance or something that came over you when you were in a psych ward. Can you talk about that?
Sure.
Or maybe it wasn't a psych ward. I thought it was. I
No,
kind of
you're
pictured
right.
it being. I thought it pictured it being in sort of one of those institutional environments.
No, it was a psych ward. My last suicide attempt, I took a 9mm gun, I put it to my temple, and I pulled the trigger. And it went click. And then I pulled the trigger again, and it went click. And I looked at it, and the safety is engaged by less than a millimeter, not even a millimeter, just like the width of a strand of hair.
By accident, right? Like,
yeah, a divine accident. Because I fully intended to kill myself. I was pulling the trigger on a gun that I had fired a test shot. I knew the gun worked. So that evening, I was in a psychiatric hospital. I found an empty room. I was just laying on the floor, sober, no drugs, no, I had drank a 6-pack earlier in the day, but that had worn off. And I felt this just serenity, this peace just came over me, just a feeling of calm and peace that I had never felt anything like that before. And that's when I knew that I would not be released from this earth until I had fulfilled my purpose. And that was my last suicide attempt. And I didn't know what my purpose was. I still don't, I hope I'm following the right path by talking and sharing my story. But yeah, it was it was divine.
How old were you then?
Ooh, 23, I believe.
So, because I just what it made me think of is that you had this place that you went to, I pictured it kind of being like